Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, January 23rd, and I hope you all are having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis, and in today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we go to Allen, where he meets with Flowforge CEO, ZJ Vanderweg, to discuss Node-RED, their open source tool that helps with low-code, no-code development, which is offered as a SaaS solution. Alan then sits down with Chris Eng, Chief Research Officer at Veracode, to talk about Veracode's State of the Software Security Report 2023. Then we go to AWS reInvent 2022, where Alan spoke with Jill Stelfox, Executive Chair and CEO of Panzura, to discuss Panzura's launch of a new comprehensive data management solution for customers that work in sensitive data environments, such as the public sector, healthcare, and the financial services market. Then at AWS reInvent, Mitch spoke with Adam Frank, Vice President of Product Management and Design at Armory.io, to discuss Armory's new cloud-based solution, Continuous Deployment as a Service, which will allow developers to enjoy fast, reliable, declarative deployments with the GitOps experience they love. Also at AWS reInvent, Mitch spoke with Eldad Shai, co-founder and CEO of Satori, to discuss how to implement a modern data security strategy and key considerations around securing sensitive data in multi-cloud hybrid environments. Then our climate and sustainability contributor, Bonnie Schneider, sits down with Natalie Lavery, marketing lead of Climate People, to discuss the growing need for strong tech talent to fill job openings at global organizations focused on climate solutions. We will then be airing an episode of Techstrong Research Review. In this episode, Mitch and Mike cover the key takeaways of Predict 2023 and highlight how the Techstrong community drives Techstrong research. Then we have 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike Vizard interviews Nucleus Security CEO, Stephen Carter, as Stephen explains exactly how AI platforms, such as ChatGTP, will be used for both good and bad in cybersecurity. Then, Mike interviews Raul Subramaniam, Chief Evangelist for CloudFix, as Raul explains why cloud computing environments have become so complex to manage and what IT teams need to focus on to regain control at a time when the rate at which application workloads are moving into the cloud only continues to accelerate. And that's what we have coming up for you on this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for January 23rd. First up, T-Mobile, one of the largest U.S. wireless carriers, announced that a hacker had breached its network in late of November of last year and stole data of over 37 million customers, including addresses, phone numbers, and date of birth. T-Mobile did state, though, that the data exposed to the theft did not include passwords, bank account, or credit card information, though. The company said that it would spend over $150 million throughout 2023 to increase its data security and other technologies. Zooming out, though, this is not the first time T-Mobile has been hacked in recent years, with another breach occurring back in late 2021. Additionally, the frequency of cybersecurity breaches at T-Mobile is an outlier among other telecommunication companies and raises questions about its cybersecurity management. Next, the Supreme Court of India has refused to block Google's antitrust order, which could potentially have a negative impact on the company's financial stability in India. The court denied Google's request to block a ruling made by India's antitrust watchdog for anti-competitive practices in assuming a dominant position in markets such as its App Store, web search services, and online video hosting. Google has one last chance to avoid the ruling through the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. If it does not rule in Google's favor, though, the company will be required to make changes to Android. Zooming out, India is Google's largest market by users, with over 500 million monthly active users. Google has warned that if the ruling is allowed to proceed, it would lead to devices becoming more expensive, an increase in unchecked apps that pose a threat to security. While on the subject of Google, it has announced that it is cutting 6% of its workforce, or approximately 12,000 jobs, as it becomes the latest tech company to reduce its staff. Additionally, the company has stated that it will be focusing more on investing in artificial intelligence as an area of growth. This is one of the company's biggest ever rounds of layoffs, and it adds to the other tens of thousands of job losses announced by Microsoft, Amazon, and other tech companies as they adapt to a more uncertain economic environment. Just this month, 48,000 jobs have been cut by major companies in this sector. Next up, Amazon has announced that it plans on terminating its long-running charity program, Amazon Smile, as part of its cost-saving efforts. The program, which was in operation for 10 years, will close on February 20th of this year. The program donated a small percentage of eligible purchases to a selected charity, but Amazon has stated that with over 1 million charities, the program's impact was often not significant. This decision comes as Amazon is cutting jobs and reducing various parts of its business to reduce expenses. Earlier this month, Amazon announced that the layoffs at the company will affect around 18,000 employees and primarily impact the company's retail division and its people, experience, and technology organizations. On Digital CXO, we have an article looking how CX teams can stay ahead of customer needs with AI. These days, successful customer experience needs to be alongside technologies that optimize and personalize engagement. AI is drastically changing customer relationship management, and this article looks at how it does just that. To learn more, go to digitalcxo.com. On DevOps.com, we have an article looking at how to empower developers and increase productivity. One of the big goals of DevOps is to increase productivity, but too many organizations still rely on manual steps in the deployment process. This article looks at 6 tips and tricks to remove the barriers to increased productivity. To learn more, go to DevOps.com. Finally, on Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at how the FCC is revamping its breach reporting by shortening the waiting period. The FCC cited the increase in security breaches and the need to protect sensitive consumer information for the reason for doing so. To learn more, go to SecurityBoulevard.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I've got an exciting open source project to share with you now, and one of the companies behind it and fostering it. I want to introduce you to ZJ, and ZJ's real name, for those of you out there, and I'm going to mess this up, but I'm going to do the best I can, is Zagian Vanderweg. And that's not right, but ZJ, say your name correctly for all the folks out there.
Zagian van der Weg.
All right, I was close. I'm missing it. I just don't have that Dutch. I'm practicing it because we'll be in Amsterdam in April for KubeCon, and looking forward. It'll be my first trip to Amsterdam, actually. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, you'll love it.
Yeah. So ZJ, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's start there.
So I'm CJ, and my background is in computer sciences, and from there on out, I joined this small startup called GitLab back in the day, and started there as an intern and worked first on the platform and later on the CI/CD systems. And later, I transitioned into everything Git related, making the data available and storing it securely. Later, also replicating it was a very exciting time. And then I transitioned into this role at Flowforge, where we're bringing the Node-RED product and the ecosystem to a production-ready and enterprise-ready state with our company called Flowforge.
Love it. That was a mouthful of stuff right there. Let's try to take it apart one at a time.
Yeah.
First of all, congratulations on GitLab. I'm sure it was a tremendous growing experience for you as you know, as the company grew all the way through to where it is today. We, of course, you know, friends with Sid and the whole GitLab team from early on, and happy to see the success. So you mentioned the company you're with now is called Flowforge, right?
Exactly.
Flowforge. And Flowforge is providing service product around an open source project called Node-RED, Noderd. Correct? Let's start with Node-RED first, and then we'll get to Flowforge, okay? Tell us a little bit about Node-RED, kind of what it does, how it got started, what it's about.
Yeah. So Node-RED is an 8-year-old project already, started out of IBM. And it is a project where you can drag and drop a solution together. And it's a flow-based way of programming. And it's built onto Node.js, and it's literally drag and drop. So if you can use Excel, you can program, really. And this is used very extensively, from home automation to deep IoT solutions, where it's accessing data, obtaining the data, normalizing the data, and then sending it elsewhere. And it's used by a lot of people that don't have like a CS degree, computer science degree. They weren't taught to actually do this, but now have the skills to build solutions as developers. And so what's unique about Node-RED is that there's an ecosystem around it. There's plugins where you can drag and drop. So, for example, you have a built-in HTTP server where you can serve requests and take the data and then drag and drop it to a new protocol of your choosing. This could be FTP or MQTT, or you can store it in a database. It's super flexible, and there's already 4,000 integrations. So usually anything you need, you can drag and drop it together.
I don't know how much you know. I'm going to assume you know a lot more than I know. Tell us about sort of the origins of Node-RED and how it was started and how the community sort of coalesced around that.
Yes, so it was first an internal tool at IBM. So the co-founder of the company, Nick, started it because he was doing about the same job over and over again in the early days of IoT. So early days of IoT, there was this protocol MQTT to pass messages around on unstable connections. And he was debugging it and wrote a tool to do so. And then on an evening was basically playing with a canvas in HTML and figured, hold on, I can combine these two sets of knowledge and then make a low programming way of just quickly drag and dropping things together so we can debug it quicker, or normalize data and then send it on to another MQTT broker. And he saw the value in there, but also recognized if it's only MQTT and if it's only me building this, that's not going to fly, and we don't have an ecosystem. And the utility of the tool I'm building is not as big as if I open source this. So then he went through the whole process at IBM to open source it, to which they agreed. And from there on out, built a community. And the community adoption has been amazing. It's used, for example, in home automation a lot, but also very often in industry type settings where they use a lot of MQTT, but also OPC UA. All these protocols come together. And what's unique about industry and what Node-RED really solves for them, that is hardware that is 80 years old. Well, not 80, 30 years old, sorry. So 30-year-old hardware is talking to the cloud, which is coming up with new protocols every day. And with Node-RED, they can drag and drop an old protocol, Modbus, for example, to an S3 bucket in AWS, literally in seconds.
Agreed. this is a almost a no pun, a Swiss Army knife type of open source project where there's a lot of different uses here. The current status of the project, is it just an independent maintained? Is it part of like a foundation or anything?
It's part of the OpenJS Foundation. There's a technical committee that runs the project, but it is in many respects a very community-driven project.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Just while we're at it, website or GitHub or wherever people can go?
Yes, the website, if you want to try our SaaS offering or install it yourself, is flowforge.com. And then the GitHub repo is github/flowforge/flowforge. That's the main repository. You can host it on Kubernetes, Docker, or on your local machine. Everything works out of the box. And you get a way to run Node-RED with multiple users in a scalable environment with secure defaults.
Okay. Let's focus on the commercial entity now, though.
Yeah.
Node-RED does this many things. It can do this many things, right?
Yeah.
But with Flowforge, you're not really looking to do that many things. You have a very specific kind of use case. Why don't we dive into that a little bit?
Yes. The way our pricing is structured, we sadly price out hobbyists most of the time. And right now we're mostly focusing on industry because there was natural adoption for Node-RED already. And the problems we've solved over the past 1.5 years of development were most prominent at their instances. For example, industry these days, it could well be an air-gapped environment. So how do you process data if the cloud is not available? But you do want to keep up with the changes of the environment. Like we're not in the 90s anymore, so people expect DevOps. How do you get DevOps in an industry going that is usually very resistant to change? And that's what we're trying to solve with Flowforge. So we'll provide tooling to go from basically a development environment to staging, review it, and upgrade to production, provide multi-tenancy with role-based access controls, all the modern feature sets.
Excellent. And, we mentioned the website. Now, there's a big use case with RPA here, right?
Yes. There's definitely a big use case. There's a lot of adoption on that front as well, and this is one of the reasons we started with our SaaS offering as well. There's just a cloud hosted. There's no really real problems to maintain the hardware or the infrastructure at all. We'll manage it all for you, and you get to use the same the same plugins that the whole Node-RED community already provides, regardless of your industry.
So, using the SaaS offering, there's no degradation of any of the all of the plugins that work with the Node-RED open source work in the SaaS as well, because that's
a lot of use cases
not really.
to cover.
Yeah. So some of these plugins are reading a temperature from a sensor. So if the sensor is not connected to your Docker container, there's no real use in using those. And it would be better just to do an API call to one of the weather services. So those obviously won't work. And there's a large set of those. You have to be connected to the hardware where it actually works. But nonetheless, people want to sometimes develop in the cloud and then transition and push that solution to an edge location. And that's where we aid them. So they can still install the nodes, or they can work on their desk locally, push their changes to the cloud, and from there on out, roll it out to one or many devices, however remote these are.
Great. CJ, when we talk about low-code, no-code kind of solutions, it could be a loaded term. Some people get very upset with that term. I don't know if you've run into this. In my mind, there's kind of two camps. There's what I call the citizen developer people, right? These are people who are not developers. They don't claim to be developers. They're not even necessarily in the development team. They might be on a business team or a HR team or something, but they need an app for them, I don't want to categorize them all as simple, but a relatively simple app that I can build without having to go to my development team and make it a year-long project. And now you want to use a low-code, no-code tool for that.
Yep.
Because it helps. Then there's the kind of, let's call them professional developers who say, look, I could save time and effort using a good low-code, no-code tool to get the functionality I need and build around it. Would you say, who's the audience here for Node-RED, do you think?
I'm going to cheat. I'm going to say both.
Okay.
So, what's interesting is there's a function node which basically gives you a JavaScript environment in Node-RED. So what you'll see is that people who have the on-ramp, like I know how to develop, but now we're using this tool, they'll use the function node a lot. And then after a while, they understand that dragging and dropping, for example, the filter node is much easier than just calling this function in the function node yourself. So eventually they'll transition to a common language as basically any language. So wherever, if you pick up Rust from tomorrow and you start from JavaScript, you'll reach for tools because you're successful that way. So yeah, I'm not going to choose a camp between no-code and low-code, but the low-code of Node-RED, there are circumstances where you just need to write code because what you're doing is so specific to your use case. It's not worth writing the custom node. Because if you want to provide a drag and drop interface, you need to program this node. If you're going to do that for one use case, that's not efficient. So that's why the function node is there. And the function node serves as an on-ramp for a lot of developers where they'll start with the function node and then later understand, there's all these tools in my tools box now, which I can drag and drop instead of program and type. And because of the function node, Node-RED is really a low code. After a while, there are just circumstances where it's easier to Google, how do I do this in JavaScript, than install 5 new custom nodes and figure out how these wire together properly.
Got it. Excellent, man. Hey, ZJ, as I mentioned, it's only a 15-minute interview. We're over that already. But you know what? I'm glad you gave our audience a little bit of a peek into both Node-RED as well as the company. Website one more time in case people missed it. What's the company website?
Flowforge.com. So flowforge.com. Yeah.
Excellent. Hey, come back and keep us posted.
Yeah, we'll definitely do.
It's
enjoy your time in Amsterdam soon.
Yeah. Yes.
April. Looking forward to it. Should be a great KubeCon. Or Cloud Native Con as well. Anyway, we're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. We'll be back in just a minute.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm really happy to have my friend Chris Eng with us. For those who don't know Chris, he is one of the guys in security. I've known Chris Eng for, 20 years, maybe 18 years.
So long.
A long time. It was At Stake, and then it was Semantic, and then Veracode and Broadcom, and Veracode not at Broadcom, and all the permutations here. Chris is still here. He's still doing security. He's still one of the sharpest guys in the industry. Chris, welcome. It's good to see you.
Always good to talk to you, Alan.
So, Chris, look, our audience knows Veracode, but just in case there's some people not familiar, if you don't mind, give us a quick Veracode background story, and then we'll jump into it.
Yeah, well, Veracode helps our customers build software security programs, basically, through a combination of automated tools and services. And that's basically been our MO since day one. One of the first companies out there to kind of do this in the cloud. And that's what's kind of allowed us to do the reports that like the one we're releasing this week.
Absolutely. I don't want to embarrass Chris, but look, Veracode was one of the leaders kind of inventing the application security space the whole DevSecOps movement. They were early on and one of the early movers and shakers and leaders there as well. And Chris has been right in the middle of it, right? Chris, you lead the director or VP. I don't even remember your title.
Yeah, I lead the research
team
organization. Yeah, that's right. So all the new capabilities that we build out in terms of scanning new languages and platforms and frameworks, that's my team that's kind of researching those and understanding, well, what is it that we're going to scan for? How are we going to scan for it? As well as looking at all those new capabilities that we're bringing on as we kind of branch out into other markets and other technologies. So a lot of cool stuff going on.
Absolutely. All right. I think we've sufficiently embarrassed you. Let's move on. Let's move on to the results of this new survey and now a report that you guys have come out with.
Sure. Well, I mean, just a little bit of background on it. It's something we do roughly annually. And one big difference from a lot of the reports that you read out there is that this one is not a survey. This one is real world data. So we take the results from all the applications that we scan through Veracode products, through Veracode services, and we analyze that data set. So it's 750,000 applications, probably the largest data set of this kind anywhere in the world. And so then we look for trends. We look for what's happening, what behaviors are we seeing, what outcomes are we seeing, and then how can we tie different factors to better outcomes and give readers some actionable takeaways on what they should go do to improve their programs. So that's the idea of this. We've been doing it now for 13 years. The first time we did it, it had 1,500 applications in it. And like I mentioned, now we're up to 750,000. So wow, pretty fun stuff.
Just the scale is amazing. And you're right. I did know it wasn't a survey, but
I know you knew that.
Interviews with people with surveys.
I mean, it's just a tremendous the data set. One of the things, Chris, I was writing about. So we have this Predict virtual event where we talk about, what the year coming up holds, and one of the things Mike Rothman is heading it up this year for Techstrong Research. But one of the things we spoke about was that big data is getting bigger, but we're better at handling it, right, than we were 5-10 years ago. So when you get a data set like this, I mean, it used to boggle the mind how you would find anything actionable in there and, like needles in haystacks. But today we actually can, peer into that data and see patterns and see insights.
It's true. I mean, you used to be able to do this in an Excel spreadsheet.
It was a little different.
And then at some point you had to go up a level and actually put it into a database. And now, you're to the point where what we do and have done for the past 4 or 5 years now, I guess we've worked with a data science firm, Scientia Institute, and those guys could really take this massive amount of data we have, and we could start to spend more time, like the Veracode folks can spend more time thinking of the questions that we want to answer, and less time trying to worry about how are we going to take this data and come out with those answers. And so, like this time we've said, well, we spent a lot of time in the past looking at flaw remediation patterns and what are the factors that lead to better or worse fix times for developers. And this time we said, well, let's even shift further to the left and let's talk about flaw introduction rather than looking at this big pile of vulnerabilities that we've built up over time and how long it's taken to fix them. How can we actually prevent those from being introduced in the first place? And what do those patterns look like? And then the data scientists just run with it, and we can kind of go back and iterate with them as we find stuff. It's like, oh, dig more into this part of the chart or something. So it really is amazing. Not only what you're able to glean from a data set of this size, but also like how long it takes to like. We start on this probably 6 months before it comes out because there's just so much. There's so many questions to ask.
Let's face it.
data science wasn't a science, right? When you were starting out with this stuff, it really is now, the data lakes. So let's jump into it though, Chris. What I always like to know what's the top three kind of findings from this year's report that our audience should be aware of.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one of the real surprising ones as we looked into that flaw introduction thing that I mentioned is that there's not a correlation between application growth and the rate of flaw introduction. So by that, what I mean is like, even though once you start developing and maintaining an application, it's growing. The code base size is growing by about 40% year over year, as you would expect. You add new features and so on, right? But the number of flaws that you're introducing does not follow that same pattern. It doesn't follow the pattern of the size of the code base. What actually happens is that when an application is new, you start out the first time you scan it, there's about a 30% chance you'll discover some accumulated flaws. And then in that first few months, you see this drop in terms of flaw introduction. Teams are introducing less and less. Hopefully they're fixing some as well. And then over the first year or year and a half or so, it kind of plateaus. There's this, we're calling it in the document just like a honeymoon phase where the flaw introduction is just, the rate of flaw introduction is not really growing. It's kind of flat, even though the application is getting bigger during that time, bigger and more complex. After that 1.5 to 2 year mark, the flaw introduction starts to rise again, start rising at a gradual pace. But it's weird. They're totally disconnected from one another. And so what that means, not really sure. Or kind of like, why is that happening? Certainly when an application is new, you have a lot of concentrated knowledge by the developers on that team, like how the application works and how all the moving parts. And over time, developers fall off the project, they move on to something else. It gets more complicated. You start building integration, everything. So there's a lot of factors that come into play there that might contribute to that honeymoon period and then that changing. So that was one big finding. The second thing we tried to do was figure out, all right, well, here's what the general shape of the curve looks like for flaw introduction. How can we change the shape of that curve? How can we make that initial drop faster? How can we make the plateau longer, or that instead of it increasing over time, stay flat or decrease over time? What are the factors that we see teams doing that could influence that rate? And so what it comes down to, at least in the items that we were able to kind of isolate, is scan automation, scan cadence and frequency, and developer security training. So these are all things where when we looked at applications and we kind of separated out the applications that were, for example, scanning in their pipeline, we saw that those had a reduced probability of adding new flaws. We saw for applications where developers had completed at least 10 interactive security trainings, the rate and their volume of flaw introduction was lower. And these things are additive, right? So you do one good practice, you get a good outcome from it. You do two, you get an even better outcome. You scan every month, right? You get an even better outcome. And so there's actually quantifiable metrics around all these things, which I'll let your listeners go read the report for that. But these stack on top of each other. And then the third thing that I thought was pretty interesting was we took a look at open source, which we've done before, but we rather than looking at the whole universe of open source that's out there, which a number of reports do, and that's fine, but to some degree, a lot of it's irrelevant, right? Because there's a lot of stuff on GitHub that maybe has some bad code in it, or even malicious code, but it's actually never used by anybody. It's never used in like a major enterprise application. So what we did was we took the 750,000 applications that in our data set, and we looked at the GitHub repositories that those applications are actually using, right? So this is representative of real world. And then we started to look at some characteristics of those repositories, because these are the ones that actually matter. These are the ones that are in use and, protecting customer data and so on. So we looked at things like how many maintainers does it have? A lot of them have one maintainer. How often does it get updated? Have there been commits happening in the last month, the last year? And then the most surprising thing to me was we looked at all of our applications and we said, well, what percentage of them rely on at least one of these fragile libraries? In JavaScript, it was 92% of applications were using at least one library that had a single developer and that hadn't been maintained in over a year. So not to say those libraries are bad, but it does point a little bit to like the fragility here. Because like what happens, right. You don't like what happens if that developer loses interest or gets run over by a bus, like how quickly are they going to respond when something happens? And like, do I really want?
Or he decides to take it down,
or take it down, right?
Too.
Which has happened, and then half the internet just breaks. And so, if you're developing like a business critical application that's built on top of all these different pieces of open source, you have to think about that in terms of your resiliency and fragility. And this is something we want to expand on a lot more in the future. But we barely had a chance to kind of get into it this time. We'll tie it to vulnerabilities, we'll tie it to fix rates and things like that, but. This open source is so much in the conversation now.
Absolutely. To me, though, that's another aspect of supply chain security that we haven't paid attention to. Supply chain security has strictly been on, are we using vulnerable components here somewhere? And it's usually open source, frankly, right?
Right.
The whole open SSF around all of that. But I think once we kind of get our hands around that a little bit, the next thing we're going to need to look at is exactly what you've called it, the fragility of the supply chain, right? Is that a single source, a single point of failure, as we used to call it, right?
Right.
And if we don't have that we don't have that supply of that, is there alternative? What is the alternative? And I think robust application development, you're going to need option Bs and option Cs. You got to look at the fragility of your supply chain, not just the vulnerability of your supply chain. And I don't think we're there yet. I think that might be a day 2 thing for supply chain security, right? But it's coming.
Yeah, it reminds you of that one, XKCD cartoon, right, where there's just the one little pillar and says like this part of the overall global software infrastructure is being held together by one person in someone's basement in Nebraska. I can't remember the caption, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah,
and it's just what happens when you knock that piece out? Something you have to think about. Yes, security is absolutely just one aspect of it.
I mean, tell the truth, when you heard about the FFA thing this morning, or the FAA thing this morning, did you think it was a security incident?
I was just having this conversation, and it's like, maybe somebody was like tripped over a cable, somebody.
Yeah, I think it's just fragile infrastructure.
I think it's fragile infrastructure. I remember one time I think it was another flight related one, not a couple of years ago, and it was just like some piece of hardware had just died because it was old. But and all these all these
I think the aviation industry between Southwest and now what happened with that.
Yeah.
A lot of technical debt is coming up to the top. Someone's going to have to pay this bill.
But
exactly.
I think it's a real issue. So, Chris, for people who want to get the report, where can we go?
You go to veracode.com. It'll be right there on the front page. The state of software security is a report. And we'll be following this one up with industry segments.
Yeah, you usually do slices.
Yeah. I mean, it's long enough. It's already over 50 pages. So we'll come back and we'll do a few page slice per industry and just kind of compare them against one another. And because ultimately, a lot of times that's what people want to know is not just like, how am I doing in an absolute standpoint, but how am I doing compared to my peers? Right? We all want to know that. And so the peer benchmarking is important. So we'll get there. But a lot of great stuff in this report. We barely scratched the surface here.
Very cool. Go check it out. It's at veracode.com. Chris, another great job, man. You guys, I know it's 6 months worth of stuff, and I know how much work goes into this thing. but it's well worth it, right? And thank you. If you're told this already, I don't have to be the only one, but thank you for what you do with it, because I think we all benefit from it.
Thanks for helping us spread the word.
I do the best we can, man. Say hello to the other Chris and all my other Vericode friends.
You bet.
I was actually out in San Francisco scouting Moscone Center and RSA.
Oh, God, too soon.
Not too soon. It'll be here before you know it, man.
Too soon, Alan.
Too soon. I will see you out there.
I will. All right.
Take care.
care.
Keep saying.
From Vericode here on Techstrong TV, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here with our continuing coverage of AWS. It's really crazy out here. Well, it's AWS reInvent. There's 55,000 people here. We went downstairs recently. Our next guest was down there. And keep in mind, we're in the Wynn, which is really kind of the hotel next to the event. And the lobby there is chaos.
It's a zoo.
Yeah, it's a zoo. That's a good word. I'm glad you said it. Let me introduce you to Jill Stelfox. Jill, welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're going to talk about your company in a second, but before we do, let's hear a little bit about Jill's story.
I am the CEO of Panzura. We bought the company 2.5 years ago. And before that, I worked with a company called Zebra, and we implemented next-gen stats for the NFL. So that's what most people know me for, is all those lines and speed and distance.
That we see on NFL?
Those are patents that I have. So
Really? Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah.
Good job on those, too.
And I do know football, and I should not join your fantasy league.
You can't be any worse than I am.
I'll win.
Oh, well, there's no.
I will win.
How about next year? I bring you in as a ringer.
We could partner.
Yes, because it's a horrible thing to be the CEO and always be last. Yeah. And I'm a good football fan.
I'm banned from playing it.
Well, I would imagine they probably can't let you play here in Vegas.
Yeah. 2 years ago, we did 2 fantasy leagues. I played in both because I was trying to be fair, right? And I won them both. And then they're like, now you can't.
You're done. Well, the fact that you did the AWS stats for the NFL probably would preclude you, but no one on our team will know.
Right.
Next year I'm reaching out. I think I'll double the dues too.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll make it worth our while. All right. You didn't hear that. Anyway, what a great story. Let's talk about Panzura.
Yeah. We are a hybrid multi-cloud data management company. And so what we do is we offer a global file system, right? Lets you track primary files all over the world, move them to who needs to use them where they are. And then we added on top of it a whole data management layer. So we have a metadata catalog. We can tell you everything about what's going on, who's using what when, what's going on. And then my background, coming from sports and everything else, is AI and ML, and we added this great engine 2.5 years ago. The coolest part about Panzura and why we bought it is we manage 12 billion snapshots every day all over the world for huge banks, huge hospitals. Wow. So we have so much data to drive a data engine on top of. So now we can tell you things like, are you compliant with GDPR? Are you shipping healthcare information that has a HIPAA requirement to the wrong place? And we can alert IT and they can decide what they want to do. And then that's turned into the next phase that we're super excited about, which is ransomware recovery. So we can tell you within about 2.5 seconds that you have an event, and we can tell you what's happening to what files exactly. And therefore, you can grab them and put them back into production because we have a snapshot.
Because you snapshotted the whole thing. Oh my God.
Because we snapshotted the whole thing.
So this is a huge security compliance.
It didn't start off that way, but it happened.
All roads lead to security in my life. It's okay.
Yeah.
But that's pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Just sitting here, it's got to be mind-boggling the amount of data we're talking about, though. Yes.
It is mind-boggling. We run the trading room floors for a large financial institution. We bring data back from space. We do large hospital systems and all of their lab data.
So without prying too much, I got to get this straight now because you kind of got me going. When you say we bought Panzura, who's we?
So, my background, like I think everybody has superpowers, and for some reason my superpowers is seeing great tech and being able to turn it into a great company. And so after I left Zebra, I formed a company with a partner of mine. We've been working together for 20 years, and we started a company called Edgy. And we did sales and marketing for tech companies that struggled to find a path to market. And if we loved it, we kind of fancied ourselves as investors, and we'd invest like $100 grand, just like a few shekels.
Absolutely.
Right? We thought we were ballers. Just so you know.
I get it. I get you. So we fancied ourselves ballers.
Yeah. And so that's how we learned about Panzura. And we came in to do sales and marketing, and we just saw they were selling this global file system, but they didn't have that data management layer. And when I see 12 billion snapshots and trillions of files, I'm like, that's data, baby.
Yeah, that's
I'm in.
Yeah, all in.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And
what
so,
a great story.
Yeah, we reached out to investor friends that I know that have backed me before, and we literally bought the company on May 7th of 2020, right in the middle of COVID. So.
Yes, I remember it well.
Yeah. Yeah,
Woo.
crazy time.
But it was a good time, too, because it gave you a chance to, in the middle of all this chaos, to kind of set it straight there.
So we grew, in the last 2.5 years, we've grown 485%.
My God.
And we are cash flow positive.
Good for you. That's a beautiful thing.
I know.
So you heard AWS reInvent.
Yeah.
What do you hear, see, think?
It's a lot of people here.
Well, yes, beyond after 3 years or whatever it's been of COVID, seeing this many people in one place. Yeah, I get that.
It's a lot. So we work with all the hyperscalers, but I will say AWS is built for the enterprise. And it really is built to have the pieces in terms of the investment that they do and how we work together. We deploy our stuff. All of our data management services are on AWS.
I was ashamed to ask you that.
Yeah, they are, which is really cool.
That's got to be a huge.
It's a huge advantage, right?
Yes, it is.
And it's so simple for customers to buy, and right? And then we go to market with them as well. And so it's a really cool partnership. Most of our customers, I think we work with 2 or 3 of their top
biggest.
10. Yeah. And, it's been a great relationship. And we do all this quite quietly.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here flabbergasted that I've heard of Panzura, but I think it was before
Yeah.
you got involved, and they were, okay,
Yeah.
Panzura.
Yeah.
But this is a phenomenal story. I always like to throw petabytes and stuff like that around.
Yeah.
What are we talking here?
That's interesting because we think of it company by company. I'll tell you this, when we bought the company, our average ARR was like $50K or something like that when we bought the company. Mm-hmm. It's now millions of dollars. Yeah.
Crazy.
It's big. So we've changed it completely.
What about in terms of your scalability at Panzura? Do you see any boundaries or limits on your scalability?
No, I don't think that's the boundary. Where I envision this, so I think storage hasn't changed in the last 20 years, and it
probably longer.
Yeah, right. And it should change. And I think this idea of data management where you have one pane of glass is where we're headed. So we've launched, not only can you see into Panzura, but you can also see into other people's storage. And that's where the goodness happens, I think. So we see this scaling on the data management side quite large. Mm-hmm. And that's I mean, it's my love and my background, so.
And it's exactly, it is right in your sweet spot. But do you see a point where it gets too big?
I don't today, because we are very careful. I mean, it's actually funny. People ask me all the time, why don't you do this or why don't you do that? It's like, well, listen, when you grow 485% in the last 2.5 years,
You got to pick your battles.
you got to pick your battles. So we don't say yes to everybody, and that sounds ridiculous because we're walking into a tough economy. But for us, we only focus on what we know we can be really successful in.
And that's a great. So I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur myself. I
Nice.
got 25, 30 years doing venture-backed startups and stuff. And I learned from someone much, much smarter than me that sometimes to be a successful business person, it's the deals you say no more than the deals you say yes to. Right?
I think this is the advantage of being older.
Thank you.
We might be wiser.
But
I don't know.
I
Maybe.
learned. No, you
Maybe.
know what? I got the T-shirts to prove it. I've learned these lessons. I spent $5 million chasing Lehman Brothers accounts, only for them to, you know what happened to Lehman Brothers. Actually, Mitchell's standing here. He was my co-founder there. He'll tell you that.
I have a hat that says Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, no, I have. We
It's
were
in my
Lehman
collection.
Live. We were the Lehman Live portal.
Yeah.
It went live. Anyway, but that's another story for another interview. But that is an important thing, right? Know what you do it well, and know what you don't do well, and don't do it.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
And we do some amazing workloads of things where we think we make a big difference. And they're always the hardest workloads. It's actually funny. One of our banking customers, we do all their wire transfer. They're large. And they called us one day and they said, hey, I think I owned the company maybe 3 months. And they said, we're taking over the wire transfer system for the United States because they can't process wire transfers during COVID. And I'm like, oh, okay. Wow. And then I asked that question to my CTO, can we, we will scale, right? Like, are we
We'll be able to
good?
do this, right?
Are we good?
That's all you want to know. Are we good?
Are we good?
No
And
problem.
Thankfully, we were good.
Thank God
Yeah.
for
They're like,
that.
it's only trillions every minute. I'm like, oh, okay.
We
We're
won't.
going to be fine. It's going to be fine.
But it's amazing how this stuff works. Let me ask you, for people who want to get maybe more information on Panzura,
Yeah.
where just go to panzura.com.
Panzura.com for sure.
Now that I've met you, besides being on my fantasy football team next year, I need to keep following this story. This is a great story. This is, I'll tell you, I probably did 10 interviews today. And there's a lot of good stories, but this is a really, really great story.
We're having
Congratulations
fun.
to you.
Thank you.
If you're not having fun, don't do it. Life's too short.
Yep.
I agree with you. All right, we're going to take a break. We're at AWS reInvent. We'll be back in a minute. And thanks for joining us.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, we are here at AWS reInvent 2022 in Las Vegas and at our Techstrong TV studios set up in the Wynn in a special suite. And we're doing a lot of great conversations with, off the show floor so we can talk to each other and have some good conversation, not have to talk over a whole bunch of other people, hitting the booths and all that. So I'm very pleased to have Adam Frank join me today. He is VP of Product Management and Design with Armory. Welcome, Adam.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, tell us about yourself. Tell us a little bit about Armory.
Great. So Armory is really specializing in continuous deployment, knowing that that's a huge struggle for a lot of customers out there, big pain point for developers. Really making sure that we can focus in on the cross-environment orchestration of it, and progressive deliveries like blue-green and canaries, really assuring the customer experience for everybody and accelerating their software delivery timelines is kind of at the root of it. A little bit about myself. I've been on the DevOps side of things, mostly on the ops for years and years. More recently switched over to the dev side of things, but it's a space that I am very passionate about, right from a childhood memory actually, and I quite enjoy it.
It's always good when you bring the good experiences, maybe a few of the scars along the way, from actually living it and doing it, which is awesome.
Yeah.
It's interesting when we talk about continuous deployment. everybody starts on CI/CD, usually the CI part of it. And there's sort of that emotional or mental aspect of automating deployment. And what do you think is kind of a thing that helps people get over that? I'm going to do this automation. I'm not going to do it by hand, or manually stopping the process every time.
I think it's the sheer amount of breaks that happen. Time and time again, you hear about outages and this happened and this happened, and just the fragility that is all the customizations that get extended on top of CI systems. CI systems are great; they're absolutely necessary, but they come with a lot of flexibility where people start to build that last little bit of deployment, and they were never designed for that. So I think it really comes with, again, just the amount of outages and breaks and things that happen, and people get frustrated with it, and it forces them down the path of truly automating it. That and just the testing and security scanning aspect of it. Nobody wants to manually log into something, manually run some tests. They want to write code. They want to see where that code's been deployed. They want to understand what that experience of that code is. And so it gets back to just kind of the root of that is being able to write code and deploy that code and get back to writing more great code.
Well, and the more great code you write, smaller bits and pieces, microservices or whatever.
Absolutely.
The CD can be the next bottleneck too, right? So push through that, and sometimes it's the work coming or the code coming that helps you say, let's figure this out and do this, the automated deploys.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, tell us about what's happening in the show for your Armory.
Yeah, so it's been a great show so far. We've got a very nice conversation started with our T-shirts, obviously, not afraid to commit.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had a special therapy group happening too, or
well, in our line of work, I guess there might be a little bit of that too. But
we all might need some of that help.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's that notion, and you hear it time and time again that people are afraid to commit on, especially on like Fridays. We don't do any deployments on weekends, things like that. So we kind of came up with let's not be afraid to commit here. Let's trust what these tools are doing and allow them to do what they were intended to do. So it's been a really great show for us so far. We've had lots of really great conversations. We're showcasing a new product that we released back in June. Really focused there, deploying out to the Kubernetes space. So a lot of conversations there. Kubernetes is obviously kind of taken the world by storm. So it's been a lot of really great conversations with people, and it's just great to get out and see what competition's doing, what other vendors are doing as well, and finally get together in person and meet all of these people.
This is like the immersive but non-virtual, the true immersive experience.
That's right. That's very well said. It is very immersive out there right now.
It is sometimes a little too much. Well, I'm curious. So there's tons of tools to choose from, different parts of the DevOps workflow tool pipeline to solve. Where do usually people get to, let's work on continuous deployment and take that next step? Obviously, CI needs to be in place, and sometimes people work on other parts of it, automated testing. Is there a typical place where you kind of get to that point and say, now it's time?
Yeah, definitely the CI. They've practiced CI, they've gotten there with CI. And again, I think it comes back to, they've extended CI in one form or another to be able to do deployment. I think when we look at a lot of delivery and deployment solutions out there, they may have been architected in a way that fits one technology or another, whether it be Kubernetes or whether it be services on AWS. And where we really come in is being able to scale across all of these different services and making sure that scale, to us, isn't just about the performance of an application. In this case, our application. We don't just say, our application performs. It does most certainly, but scale is also, are you scaling your people efficiently? Are you scaling your processes efficiently? And that's really where it comes down to, being able to leverage something like continuous deployment to be able to scale your people efficiently, your process efficiently, and of course your software efficiently. So people, especially in today's day and age with the economy, they need developer productivity, they need cost savings. So these are really big things that are happening in the environment, and they look to ways to do that, and continuous deployment can certainly do that, since it does absolutely help grow your business, your product, and scale everything efficiently.
Yeah, a lot of focus on developer productivity because of economics. Talk about, you mentioned the tool or the release that you had come out during the summer with Kubernetes. Talk about what some of the special challenges are you had to address thinking about how to deploy in Kubernetes environments.
We recently did a study with Gartner Peer Insights and released a report, and the average number of environments that people had was 21.5. That's quite, I mean, you look at startups, and we had talked to a couple of our smaller customers, and they've got 10 different environments, and they're looking to grow that, depending on the different applications that they have. 21.5 is a lot, so it's really, the challenges are, how do you allow automatic promotion from one environment to the next to be able to achieve true continuous deployment? You can deploy out to a single environment, and then what? Then you go back and you do something manually, and then you deploy it to another environment, but you want that whole thing orchestrated. So one of the biggest challenges was really trying to figure out how to orchestrate that, being able to do that at any scale, and being able to not only be able to do that automatically, but also give people a path to be able to achieve doing that automatically if they're not quite there. So being able to put things like manual approvals in, so they can go in, do something manually that they have today that is on the list to automate. Once they've got that test or that security scanning, whatever it may be, automated, great, you can remove that manual approval, and you can just have that automatically continue and promote to the next environment, and so on and so forth.
I think another thing, to tell me if this is correct, but I think the continuity through automation, right? You don't have changes interjected into the process. Or if you need to make improvements, you can roll those out as part of deployments too, because anytime if you're going to deploy across 20 environments, are they all going to be done the same way? Hopefully, but if they're automated, much greater chance of consistency across those environments.
Yeah, most definitely. And I just finished having a fantastic lunch with a great engineer from Snap, and one of the biggest problems that he was talking about was the rollback. They've kind of got the deployment solved at this point, but it's the actual rollback, especially when they have really tightly coupled services. Everybody just wants that big red rollback button. Bring me back to that state. And he was going through edge cases over and over again where the rollbacks just don't happen in the way that they need to. So that was another really big hurdle, is to figure out how to actually just give that one-click really big button that is rollback, and it actually does roll back to that known good state really quickly. To assure that customer experience.
It's interesting when you've got that capability. I don't think we always think about this as technical people. It actually gives the business people more flexibility, maybe even more confidence of taking more risks.
Sorry.
Nope, no problem. You okay? Need a drink?
I have a little glass of water, actually.
Yeah, we'll take it. We're good. So we'll cut this out. We're not live, so you're fine.
Ooh. There's some dry air.
Yeah, I love that when it happens mid-sentence. You're like,
yeah. I can kind of feel it coming on.
Yeah, we do. We need to have like the emergency water right there, right?
There we go.
Take your time. We got plenty of time. So. Yeah, that rollback. That's why we need to roll back, because we're choking.
We're not live. We're good. So
yeah, so it's all good.
Yeah.
Not a problem. Need a Ricola?
Look at that.
Rosetta. You know what I mean?
Ricola.
That's perfect.
If you want to drop. I'll set them off to the side here. Whoops.
Well, just put them somewhere so people need one. You know what I mean?
If you need to take a drink of water while we're talking, that's fine.
Yeah.
I've got my drink ready here too, so.
Yours looks a little nicer than mine, but that's all right.
No problem. It's not a beer. It's a cola.
Okay.
Are you still rolling, guys?
Yeah, we're still
okay, so.
If you want to pick it up from wherever you.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. Great. I'll start in 3, 2, 1. You're talking about rollback, and it's interesting. There's the technical side of rollback. We need to go back to what we were doing because of some problem or issue. the business folks actually having that capability enables them to take greater risk because now they know if we have a problem, we can get back to where we were. It isn't okay. If something happens and I want to pull this, off the shelf, off the digital shelf, so to speak, they've got that capability. I mean, they know the technical teams can do that very quickly.
Yeah, the technical teams have their back. That's right, absolutely. Yeah, and that allows them to really move faster. And we talked about the smaller changes that are being deployed out there. So when those smaller changes are happening like that, those rollbacks are going to be a little bit easier, and the business does have a lot more faith in the technical folks to be able to do that. So it's a match made in nice little harmony there, I would say.
Kind of how symbiotic.
That's right.
But anything else from the show stand out for you so far, in addition to us being able to get together and talk about the cool things that you're doing with Armory?
I think just the sheer size of it this year. Maybe it's been a few years. I didn't quite remember. It seems like just the sheer size of it, and a lot of people really going kind of all out this year with advertisements and parties and get-togethers and things like that, and just really great conversations that are happening in and around the booths, and we've got JFrog right beside us, really friendly banter with JFrog beside us and stuff.
They're
too.
good
So
folks too. Yeah,
it's great. It's great to see everybody out.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we're kind of back to critical mass, I think, again.
I think so. Yeah, I definitely think so.
Adam, so where can folks find out more about Armory? I think it's .io, correct?
Armory.io, absolutely. Yeah.
Very good. And there's free or trial or test accounts or
yeah. We've got a free trial. We've got a freemium that's there as well. Staying within those limits, you're welcome to use that as long as you would like to. So yeah, you can definitely get there and try everything out. We'd love to have you try out. Love to get that feedback and hear all about what you're up to.
Great. Well, thank you, Adam. Adam Frank, who's VP of Product Management and Design with Armory, Armory.io. Check them out. Thanks for being here.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
This is Techstrong TV.
Welcome back. We are here at AWS reInvent 2022 in Las Vegas, Nevada, at our Techstrong secret location, not that secret, at the Wynn, for our studios here, interviewing some great guests and thought leaders, people talking about what's happened not only at the conference, but in the industry. So speaking of which, I have the pleasure of being joined by Eldad Chai, who is CEO and co-founder with Satori. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Good to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about Satori.
Yeah, I've been in cybersecurity for last, I think, 15 years, starting from application security, part of the team that built a really cool CDN application delivery. We were acquired, then worked for a couple of years for Imperva, and then just started my own Satori.
Okay, yeah, Imperva is a pretty big company too, so interesting. All right, well, we're talking data security. I remember the days of should we go to the cloud? Is it secure enough? We kind of got past that, just taking our applications. But I think data security in the cloud is still a concern. Not that security isn't, but it's still, we don't know where all of our data is. We don't know what it is. We don't know who's using it or has access to it. We don't know where it's being created because it so easily proliferates. And I mean, how do you see the state of the challenges? What are people struggling with?
Yeah, and I agree with tying this back to other similar migrations to the cloud. So if you go to, again, I'm coming from application security space before, like we saw how that really drove a lot of business value for companies, but then everything around people and process just broke the minute that you moved. So you can't hire fast enough. You can't train people fast enough. And any manual process around security, governance, quality, just management of the infrastructure just breaks. And then, amazing companies grew like New Relic and Chef and Puppet and Capsule and Imperva, et cetera. So we're kind of seeing the same thing with data, I think. So there's a huge business incentive to put data in the cloud. I think Snowflake did an amazing job convincing the industry that it is safe, and that proved out. but you can't hire enough data engineers. You can't train fast enough. And every manual process you had around data security just breaks. So even if you have the tools and the capabilities, they're not just there from an operational perspective. And that's kind of where we decided to focus on, really help companies streamline their security operations. You can call it data SecOps, and just be able to scale their data infrastructure.
Now, is it primarily access control? Is it, of course, data protection? What are some of the probably not new challenges? It's just things have changed and now we're doing different things in the cloud.
Yeah, so the two answers to that. So one is I think one of the biggest mistake companies do is they try to like split it into these capability driven domains and then attack them. Like, I'm going to classify all the data, then I'll figure out the rest. And that usually fails because you classify the data, then what? How do you make that in action? And if you classify the data, how real time is it? So can you actually make use of that data? So we're kind of doing access management. We're also doing classification. We're also doing visibility. And the idea here is focus on the business use case. So the business use case is there's an analyst. They need to go and do their job through Tableau on your data warehouse. There's a bunch of context around the data. Is it sensitive? Is it related to a specific customer? There's a bunch of context around the person that is accessing the data. What team are they in? What kind of profile they have? Can they? So unless you have the full context on the identity and the data and be able to be in that moment and enforce an action, it's really, really hard. And that's what we do. So you can say we're focused on data access, but it ties into classification. It ties into the identity part. And the idea is to provide a solution and not just a bunch of capabilities you need to piece together.
Mm-hmm. Does role-based access play a role? No pun intended here, or is it so mixed in what the various use cases are?
Yeah, role-based access controls play a big role in modeling how you want to interact with your data. The challenge with role-based access control is just it's really hard to scale it because, and we've seen this with many of our customers. They start with that as a model, but then eventually people move jobs, new projects are launched, you just hire more people and it becomes a monster that's really, really hard to manage. So I don't want to say that role-based access controls isn't an efficient tool. It is an effective tool, but an effective tool for a specific use case. If you have engineers that need access to production databases for 5 hours, it doesn't make sense to manage that through RBAC. You want to have something more efficient. And that's kind of how we help customers. We do temporary access, we do persistent access, but again, based on the business use case and not try to kind of do everything with one model, which again, doesn't scale in different scenarios.
Yeah, it's either that force fitted down a certain role based or everything's an exception. So now you're no longer in that zone.
Exactly.
What do you see happening at the conference? I mean, it's, we're back to fairly good size. What they say, about 60,000 people here, and there's a buzz, there's an energy on the show floor, and it's not like walking around last year when it was 20,000. It's a much bigger conference. What are you seeing happening?
So definitely it's a great event, and if you haven't been to reInvent, I encourage everyone to join. There's really good opportunities to engage with all sorts of people from the industry. So that's amazing. I'm happy to see that security is getting like a nice piece of attention. There's a section around security. There's a section around data that just tells you how important that is obviously from an AWS perspective, because that's going to drive their business and growth. But from a market perspective, they have been proven to be really customer oriented. So you see that. So I think just walking around the aisles and looking at the different security products and data product is phenomenal. And I think that I love to see the focus on the business outcome. So it's less about I have this feature and this capability. It's really around how do we drive growth for our customers with data and through security. Even security companies are starting to use that narrative. I think that's really, really smart. And yeah, it's great. It is very, very crowded.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely busy. How would you describe Satori's kind of place in the market and where you fit in?
Yeah, so we're a data security company, right? I think like Sneak, if you take Sneak as an example, they're a security company, but they sell to developers. So we work with data engineers, we work with data architects, because they eventually make the decision of whether that's part of their tech stack. So we're a data security company. Our focus within data security is really on this authorization piece of the whole security stack. So you have your identity providers, that's figured out. You have your single sign-on, but then your authorization into data is just fragmented and distributed. So that is the problem that we solve. And yeah, we fit within that category.
Mm-hmm. Do you span everything from applications and what you have within applications to just general access to a data lake or a data resource, or certain parts of that?
So today we focus on anything that sits within a data store. So our customers have Snowflake or Redshift, Azure Synapse, Mongo, Elastic, RDS, and a bunch of other databases. The idea there is companies are no longer building like monolith data stores. They're building a data infrastructure. And security should be consumed as part of that infrastructure. So we want to be that layer that solves security for all your data infrastructure, not just one database. We're starting to see more, I would say, application oriented. We're not going to cover the ERP for now and these kinds of applications, but many of the applications just have a data interface with the backend. Like some of the our customers have support engineers that need access to customer data through an application. So we would cover that. So basically our focus is data, and anywhere data is going to be stored. Today we're really honed on the data infrastructure.
Hey, you mentioned like DataSecOps, almost a data ops approach, right? A platform-based approach versus back-end databases and application access to that. How would you see people applying the idea of data ops to what they're doing?
Automation is the big deal. I think people are learning more and more from DevOps. I think that DevOps principles are well accepted, and people want to borrow them. I think you see a lot of data engineers being less like DBAs and more like software engineers, which I think is a good thing. So it's really around automation. DBT, I think, is a great example of how a company came in and helped just manage the whole data pipeline, landing zone creation automatically. And I think security needs to follow the same path.
It's interesting. I think early DevOps, I don't know if it's too strong to say that it kind of forgot about data, but it wasn't a big part of how we thought about the pipeline and the workflow. Security elevated, with DevSecOps, and it seems like data ops is starting to enter into that fray too, or into that perspective of how does data fit into the whole development workflow, the pipeline, and applications and infrastructure aspects. Because we have data, we're capturing user experience telemetry now in applications that go into observability tools, but it's still data that we use for other purposes too.
Absolutely. I think once you move your data infrastructure to the cloud, it's really easy to ingest a lot of data, and it's really easy to open that infrastructure up for many, many use cases. So you have your APIs and you have all the tools that connect. That immediately creates like a next level of scale. So unless you have a really good handle on how you're going to operate that infrastructure, it's going to be really hard for you to scale. We've seen companies that were trying to create this weird scenario where they're going to move to Snowflake, but they want to borrow the same database administration process they had and apply them there. It doesn't work. So I think, again, just like DevOps was the answer for scaling your application infrastructure, it's the same with data, I guess. It just takes time, because a lot of these data engineers were DBAs, Oracle DBAs, or SAP DBAs, and it takes time to educate and learn new practices, and security is not different there.
It's not just about query optimization anymore, right? That's
exactly
important, but not the only thing.
Exactly. And I think what we're seeing now, so not ignoring the economical situation, companies have invested a lot and got a lot of returns and now thinking about how to optimize. And I think that is where data operations really play a big part. I think there's going to be a lot of focus there because it's not about am I going to use the product or not? It's how do I optimize the usage for there? Mm-hmm. And these teams are going to be spending a lot of time in thinking about how to eventually cut costs and be more efficient, but how do they streamline a lot of things they're doing today in a more efficient, cost-effective way?
You mentioned DBAs, kind of thinking more like developers. What do you see that kind of a role evolving to? Is it almost like a data DevOps engineer kind of role? Is it more just thinking about scripting and writing code and how you create, manage data and almost data as code, if you will, sort of an idea? Where do you think that role is going?
I think we're going to see, an abstract perspective on that, more layers on top of the SQL. Like, what's the difference between a data engineer and software engineer? Like, SQL is a big, big difference because eventually the way most people want to interact with their databases, unless they're on Mongo, is SQL, and that's a very common language. But again, going back to the DBT example, they're building software layers on top of that. So these are templates, Python scripts, code that's built. And I think as a data engineer, you're going to get further and further away from crafting SQLs. Those are going to be automatically crafted until you're just using APIs, and you're going to build more software layers to automate that. So that's a shift that's happening, and you see now data engineers using more Python and more of the more DevOps kind of oriented tools.
Definitely fits more of a cloud native and also a kind of API first, right? Start thinking about that data access as an API, and GraphQL being a good example. That moves away from a SQL and maybe SQL in the back end or whatever in the back end, but think about it as an API interface or that mindset of how we access data, not worrying about the storage or the language to get to it.
Yeah, and you've seen, GCP from day one, they have an API alongside the SQL. Snowflake released an API, so it's becoming more and more common.
Yeah, EGRP and a lot of interesting things. Well, great. Eldad, it's been fantastic talking with you, and hope you have a great show. And thank you for sharing your perspective on data security and what's happening both today and a little bit where we're going. And where can folks find out more about Satori?
Just go to satoricyber.com and book a demo, and we'll tell you more about it.
Okay, fantastic. Please check it out, and we'll be back again with another great guest. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in a few.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
I'm Bonnie Schneider with Techstrong TV, and joining me now is Natalie Lavery with Climate People. Natalie is the marketing lead, and we're going to talk a little bit about how tech workers are now looking at new opportunities in the climate and sustainability space. Natalie, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
So tell me about the trend that we've been seeing with, unfortunately, there's been a lot of layoffs in the tech world in general in 2022 and even starting off in 2023. But the climate space seems to be a new area where people are considering maybe moving towards for employment.
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, there have been a massive amount of tech layoffs in the past few months. And in traditional recession fashion, we do see investors tending to flee towards safer assets. However, climate tech doesn't really fit into that mold. According to Climate Tech BC, there were $64 billion new investment dollars in climate in 2022. And that's just plain and simply because the hard reality is that climate change is real and it's continuing to worsen. And we are in dire need of technologies that address those effects head on. So climate change isn't hanging out on the sidelines. So therefore, neither can the investment dollars, the climate companies, or that talent. And then adding on to that, the Inflation Reduction Act also passed last year, which has guaranteed $370 billion in climate spending, which is also just going in towards incentivizing new innovation.
That's a really good point. And before we go further, just so our audience is familiar with Climate People, can you talk a little bit about your company and what you do there as well?
Yeah, of course. So Climate People is a first-in-class climate tech recruitment agency. Mission is simple. We are trying to mobilize a workforce transition to get more people working in climate to address some of that harm that we were just discussing. So yeah, we hire and recruit for positions across a wide range of climate sectors. And I'm a marketing lead at Climate People. So I just kind of head up all of their marketing initiatives, website outreach, all of that, really try to spread the word and get more people working on these causes.
And the Climate People is a fairly new company. How long have you been around?
Yeah, so this is our second year of business. We were started in last May. So yeah, very new. But yeah, I was kind of shocked when I joined the company. I didn't realize that there could be enough of a demand for there to be a entire recruitment agency dedicated to climate roles. But we have proved that wrong. There's a lot of jobs to be filled and we're definitely busy. So definitely the demand is there.
That's fascinating in just a couple of years, how much you've grown. Can you talk about some of the jobs in tech, like specific job titles that you see that your clients are saying, hey, these are the kind of people we're looking to hire, or positions we might be wanting to fill?
Yeah, so every job can be a climate job. That's what I always like to say. It sounds a little bit cliche, but it's really true. So at Climate People, we're seeing great demand for software engineers, data engineers, product managers, UX designers, and so on and so forth. Many technology companies tend to hire their hard tech positions first because a lot of climate companies are startups, and then they tend to hire more supporting roles in the future. But yeah, lots of hard tech right now. But again, every job can be a climate job. I'm in marketing and I'm in a climate job. So really it's all about positioning yourself in that space and figuring out how to get a job in your career field.
Do you think that some of the people that reach out to you are surprised if they are a software engineer or a product manager, and maybe they never thought about the climate space? Has that happened before, where people are new and that didn't have a background in that at all, but this is where they decided to pursue a position?
Yeah, 100%. That's kind of like the main thing we hear from people is that I had no idea that I could be in a climate profession as an engineer or as a whatever. A lot of people have a really strong misconception that you have to be a scientist or environmentalist to be in this space, but that's really not true. Climate tech is really repositioning of the entire global economy. It's not a sector. It's about reimagining how we do every different type of job. So yeah, definitely hear that a lot. And that's kind of the main purpose of Climate People, is to prove that to not be correct and really encourage people to take a job, even if they don't have that hard environmental background.
That is really interesting. You know, a lot of people obviously now are looking, when it comes to looking for work, they want to work in a position where they feel they're doing something meaningful and they're getting something out of it. Do you think that's also what attracts tech workers to the climate space?
100%, yeah. And definitely, I think people do want to work in a rewarding field. And then that paired with those layoffs that we were just discussing, how big tech and FANG companies aren't as secure as they once were. It's making it, this climate industry is emerging, and they are secure jobs, and they are well paying, and they really kind of align with everything that big tech used to be. So it's that rewarding work paired with all of those real life job factors and making people really interested in this space. And then again, we can't deny the effects of climate change any longer. And people are seeing that and they want to be a part of that solution. So it's a really great outlet for someone to take tangible individual actions.
And what about the factor of coming up with these solutions and innovations? Some of the technology I mean, let's say someone's a product engineer or they're a product manager and they're doing something, maybe they're used to developing a certain type of product, but then when you're coming into this space, it could be something that no one's ever done before. So you have a lot of innovation and kind of on both sides of it. With someone with tech experience, they're doing something that's sustainable, but since these are sustainable solutions that many of them have never been tried before, what is the spirit of that you're seeing in terms of people that you talk to that are looking for jobs?
Yeah, so a lot of it is kind of just applying all of the skill sets that existed in other realms and applying to climate. So while the solutions may look different and they may have that climate aspect, the day-to-day is honestly shockingly similar. And that's what we tell a lot of companies that we work with that are trying to hire these people is you don't have to require climate experience in order to attract some of the best talent. You can get someone that was just affected by the big tech layoffs and have them kind of reallocate those skills and directly apply them to a climate job. We actually recently conducted a survey where we interviewed around 577 people who were looking for jobs in climate and people who had jobs in climate. And we asked them what was preventing them from getting a job. And 51% of people said that their lack of climate experience was preventing them from even applying to a job. And as you can see from what I just said, is you don't really need that experience. And then people are disqualifying themselves. So really trying to find a way to make those skills that you've had in previous industries and apply that to the climate space. It's really not that different.
That is such good advice. And if someone, if people are interested in looking into climate positions, do you think that they need to, you said they don't have, obviously they don't know they don't have to be a climate scientist, but does it help though to have any interest in sustainability?
Absolutely. I mean, these companies, most of them are startups. And as you and I both know, startup founders are extremely passionate about the work that they're doing. And founders are oftentimes involved in the interview process at this stage of company. And so if you go in showing that passion and showing that you genuinely care about their climate solution, they're going to be impressed. And we do try to work with the climate companies and tell them that they don't need to require climate experience, but they still want it. So if you do your homework and you really understand the ins and the outs of the industry, it definitely will help you for sure.
And what do you think is the outlook going now that we're in early 2023? Unfortunately, we had those layoffs in the tech space last year and at the start of this year. But what is your climate people? What are you forecasting in terms of jobs and availability for tech jobs going forward?
There's going to be a lot. It's going to be a whirlwind this year, I'm sure. Terra.do is a climate education platform, and they predict that 99% of the people who will be working in climate by 2030 haven't begun. So that means in the next 10 years, 99% of the people haven't even started. So a lot of people are going to be coming into the space. And as I touched on earlier, climate tech isn't a vertical, it's a transition of the entire global economy. So at Climate People, we really do predict that we're going to see jobs in all industries across all sectors really transitioning to focus on climate solutions because there's no other option. We must start acting and addressing on these things. So yeah, that talent gap will only continue to grow at an exponential rate. So we need companies and we need people and we need to pair them together. And that's hopefully what Climate People can help with.
That is really great, Natalie. Thank you so much, Natalie Lavery from Climate People, for joining me on Techstrong TV. I think you've really opened the eyes of a lot of people that maybe thought, well, I don't know if I know enough about climate to apply for one of these positions, but I know a lot about tech. But you're saying, hey, if you know a lot about tech, there's a space for you in climate. So thank you, Natalie. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Rothman, or a worn-out Mike Rothman, I guess is the best way to put it. Head of Techstrong Research, Chief Strategy Officer of Techstrong Group, and again, kind of still in that Predict hangover. So we're recording the day after Predict. I'm joined, as always, by my partner in crime, Mitch. Mitch, say hello.
Say hello. I said hello. Yes, I'm in the same boat. This is like, the finish line at the marathon where they just kind of collapse and people bring them water and put a blanket around them. And that's sort of where especially you did the biggest lifting on all this.
Or like
CTO, principal with Techstrong Research.
Yeah, so welcome, Mitch. And it's just like, I guess yesterday afternoon, right, I kind of had this, feeling like Luka Doncic after he had that triple-double with 61 points. And he's just like, I need a celebratory beer. It was just like, Yes, I will
about
do
that
that.
big and about that wide.
Exactly. So we kicked back a little last night and enjoyed it. But I think today, what we want to do is first of all, thank everybody that, kind of joined in with Predict. It was really fantastic. We had, almost 2,500 people register for the event. We got some great feedback just on the agenda, on the panelists, on the trends. So we released our 2023 Techstrong Research Trends yesterday in the 4 areas of DevOps, cloud native, cybersecurity, and digital transformation. So we got some great feedback and a lot of downloads on those. So that's great, just to get a sense of where we're going. But I think what we wanted to do today is, not just, kind of recap it. The live stream is available, or the recorded version is available up on the site. So if you're registered, go check it out. If you missed one of the sessions, if you haven't, you still have time, right? You can register on the site and check out any of the sessions that made sense to you. But there were a couple of things that, kind of really resonated out of the panels that either I participated in or I saw. And I want to kind of dig into those a little bit. So Mitch, I don't know if you wanted to go first and talk about the stuff or first of all, what were your impressions of Predict? Let's kind of start there.
You've finished something that you and everyone, you especially working really hard on, and feel like it went really well. So I felt very satisfied about how things went yesterday, mostly from the reaction from the attendees and especially the panels, the people that were there with us. Which kind of leads me to my first thing I wanted to highlight is, I was covering cloud native primarily, and one of the big things we talk about is the complexity and how we deal with that, and establishing centers of expertise and different things in our trends document. Go download it, and you can find out lots of good ideas. There were 2 sessions, and especially the second one that I did, which was the Long March. I love our trends doc. I had software engineers from Cisco, from Dell. Okay, I haven't had that before, on a panel with a consultant, really seasoned senior software architect, enterprise architect, and myself. And they just kind of took off. It was sort of like someone had lifted the rods out of the reactor and it just chain reacted. It was going. I had to kind of keep an eye on the meters here to make sure, we weren't going to fly off the digital stream or something. But point being is they were debating this whole complexity issue. And they were debating it not as, is Kubernetes complex to set up and those kinds of issues? They were debating it as, okay, well, monoliths are complex, but if we go and create thousands, tens of thousands, more microservices, and we don't know what the heck they are. You start out with 5 or 10 or whatever, and then suddenly you've got 10,000. How do you manage that? You've sort of unleashed a different beast. And where's that happy medium? And how do we figure out guardrails or best practices? We kind of landed on this idea of software patterns for cloud native, for microservices, something that's really needed.
Yeah.
And also Tracy Reagan brought up in one of the panels, someone who's on a lot of our shows, the idea of domain-driven design, teams forming around certain areas of kind of functions or domains, part of the applications, and working together on it that way to try to minimize the sprawl. If you will.
That sounds great if I have a couple hundred developers, right, in a shared services group, and I can fund a center of excellence and all that. If I'm a small team, right, and I want to start to embrace some of these technologies because they're going to help me accelerate my ability to get to market and to build things. How do I do that, right? So again, I appreciate that. But to me, when we were working on the trends, Mitch, right, it was, the Long March, but it really was about what can we do to, whether it was standardize the distributions. That was one of the key things that you were focused on. I was focused on a lot of the, kind of commercial tools that can really start to ease both deployment as well as a lot of the enterprise type features you need, right? Backup and reliability and networking and these things that need to be able to be configured and done, without somebody having having to roll their sleeves up and, go to work, right? Or put the mask on and go into surgery, right? I mean, you just don't have that option if you're a small type of organization. To me, those are really the, kind of arbiters of maturity and the ability for, normal companies, right? Not, very tech-centric companies to be able to embrace this stuff.
Well, for every problem, there are some set of entrepreneurs looking to start a company to solve it.
Oh, yeah.
What's interesting is that is happening in this space. And one path is like frameworks. Software developers are very familiar with frameworks, and now there are products and hosting environments. You can do your whole team Kubernetes, but around an application framework for some of the management capabilities, not just of Kubernetes, but trying to control or keep repositories for all that stuff. I don't know. It's not the answer yet, but it always happens, right? We adopt a new technology. This is a great idea. We need to do this. People jump on the bandwagon. We do it over and over again, and then we say, "Whoa! By the way, how are we going to secure that? And how are we going to operate that? And now how are we going to manage it? Because there's so much of it." So we're in this cycle again of, okay, for it not to become, crater in on itself. Because all of its great benefits, but all of its side effects.
Yeah,
that's where we are, right?
No, that's right, and I think it just goes to where we are in the adoption curve, right? And the early folks, they can dedicate the resources. They have the technical expertise. They can figure it out. They can be the general contractors, and it works out great for them. But in order to become like the lamp stack, right? I mean, that was the analogy we used in the trends document. Mm-hmm. You need that other stuff, right? You need the provider, whether it was some of the precursors to, DigitalOcean or Linode or, one of these other ones where you can basically just go click, right? And it deploys WordPress on your lamp stack. Right. And I think that's really, kind of what we're looking for in 23 to start to emerge around cloud native. And I think that was a great observation. And you kept saying you were slacking me in the middle of the session going, "Oh my God, this thing is great." And I was actually doing my own session. It was just like, damn, I can't go. So that's one of the ones I'm going to, check out when I have some cycles this afternoon. I can get into the recorded version.
I ended the session with what happens when 4 software engineers from Dell, Cisco, a consultant, and a startup go into a bar. This is what happens.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So what was interesting on my end, so I did kind of the software supply chain, and software security panel, and I had a bunch of great folks on it as well, right? Tanya Jonka, who's, kind of a developer advocate. I had, David DeSanto from GitLab. He's VP of product over there. I had Jeff Williams, right? CTO of Contrast, and John Pescatori, who's, that doesn't even need to be introduced at this point, right? But he's been.
We don't have much to say about a lot of things, right?
and a Gartner has been a Gartner for many years as well. But one of the interesting things that Jeff had pointed out, because we all use this concept that applications are mostly composed and we're assembling using resources and libraries and components and services from other folks. And Jeff is like, that's a common misnomer, right? Because we do a ton of analysis on applications and we find that if you look at the total amount of code, that's probably right. But he said 90% of the stuff that's, kind of pulled into an application upon integration is not used. Right. He said, if you look at the libraries and kind of the components that are used, it's probably 70% custom development, maybe 30%, right? Open source or these other libraries. So everybody's so focused on, kind of SCA and right, software component analysis or software composition analysis and some of these other, technologies. But we're not spending enough time, really kind of helping to make the application, right, more robust, right, make the application more secure. And obviously, Jeff, where he's coming from, right, is all about, IAST and runtime protection. And I mean, listen, he's a zealot for that because he invented a lot of, kind of those technologies. So I totally get it from that perspective. But it just that data point was interesting because I was listening to the RSA session, right after mine, where they talked about, kind of trends in terms of submissions for the conference. And one of the conference, organizing committee was talking about exactly that. We compose applications, and it's all about, and it was just, I kind of went into a little bit of, kind of vertigo. They're like, where am I? Because you got two totally different data points from different folks. So I thought that was really interesting. And again, I don't have data to, kind of know definitively what the right answer is. And honestly, I don't know that it matters, because, you want to secure the stuff that you're ingesting, and you want to secure the stuff that you're building, all the same, right? But it was an interesting counterpoint that kind of we got from just the differing levels of opinion and differing kind of folks that we brought all together for Predict yesterday.
It's a spot on issue, because I could give you a real simple example. Like in Python, if you want to generate a random number, there's a package for that. I guess you use it one way and you're done, right? You call it this way. Here's the range I want, whatever. There's who knows, dozens of other functionality classes, et cetera, in it. You never use, but that package is all part of your app and part of your environment there. You never touch it. So is it really vulnerable if it's got a vulnerability in it? Maybe. But maybe not. It may never get executed or be able to get touched. So you're right. It is. There's a lot of weight, maybe dead weight, that comes with code that we use and bundle into our app.
And Jeff's point, and David and Tanya, focused on this as well, was really the context of how you're using the code within the application. Because we went back and forth about, how do you secure the pipeline? How do you get developers to take all this stuff seriously? Is there stuff that we need to do as security folks in order to make it easier for them? The whole, shift left versus shift right concept. And I think everybody agreed that it should be shift everywhere, on that part. But it was a really interesting and I think useful discussion, just because, again, you had a number of different counterpoints in there. And I wouldn't say there were heated discussions, but, again, folks definitely had perspectives and they weren't necessarily the same.
When Jeff talks, everybody listens, right? He was one of the creators of OWASP.
Yeah.
And right. So
that's right.
I've been on panels with them where some of the other panelists, not that I don't respect them, I totally do, but they were kind of in fanboy awe mode, like, oh my God, I'm on a panel.
Yeah, and there was one other point. So we did want to kind of get around to the whole regulation piece of it. And there was one point that John Pescatore brought up, which I thought was really great. He said, listen, if we really wanted to improve software security, we would make the companies that, kind of ship it liable for, what happens with their code. He said that would solve the problem in about a hot minute. Right. He said, we've done that in all sorts of other things. You got healthcare, you got, financial services, you got, if the company has liability, then they take these things a lot more seriously. He says, I don't think we're going to get there, which really means we're not going to get there. Right. Because of whether it's lobbying or, again, it's just too complicated on that front to figure out who is liable, given how a lot of these applications are built in one way, shape or form. But, he said, again, the next best thing is to really start thinking about forcing folks to look at the componentry, forcing folks to, really start to evaluate how these things are built. So he was pretty supportive of the direction that, kind of the at least the U.S. federal government is going. But, I also thought it was interesting that, he's just like, listen, if you want to solve the problem, just, make folks put some real skin in the game. He goes, and they would fix that pretty quickly.
Well, and we have a pattern. People would, and they don't ask me anymore, but used to ask me, like, when is all this credit card data theft going to stop happening? Because it seems like it happens more frequently every day. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It's never going to stop until the consequences are significant or not. Their customers walk away or they get penalized a lot more money than any fines are paying now. It's just, it's like credit card theft. When you lose a credit card and somebody steals and buys stuff on your account, you pay for it, but they don't. The cost is passed on to you. It's just there's no consequences or enough that's significant to change behavior. So they don't repeat that with software, right?
That's right. So what else? Did any other, kind of big ones? Because I've got one more after that. Yeah.
Go ahead and jump in because there's something I want to bring up at the end.
Yeah. So the other thing is sometimes you just kind of come up with terms because you're like, yeah, based on what I know and where it's gone, this just seems to make sense. So one of the things that we wrote in the trend document is, for in the security trends, right, about, kind of visibility and trying to, improve, how and what's happening in your environment. I came up with this term XSPM, right? Because we've got cloud security posture management, we've got SaaS security, data security, soon there'll be identity, security. Somebody had written application security for, kind of a scanner type of thing. So I just, it's XDR and X everything. So I just, figured we'd just call it XSPM. I was actually at a company kickoff this week earlier before we did Predict, and they're, to some degree a visibility company, and they're starting to use the term XSPM as well, because they've got stuff in networks and kind of cloud and some application things. And it was just funny because we totally had not talked about it at all. They didn't know, kind of that was one of the things that I would be pitching, while I was there. So it was one of those things where it was just so obvious, kind of in hindsight that, we're going to see a lot of folks kind of talking about XSPM, kind of this year, because again, it is a platform play. It's something that, all the vulnerability management guys should be doing. So it won't be long before, they call their visibility platforms, XSPM.
It's not a new gaming computer from Alienware.
It's not. It's not. Nothing that, it doesn't run cool games. It doesn't have Madden. So it's just not interesting to most folks.
You won't get our attention that way. But so what I wanted to bring up at the end, I've waxed on, I try to control myself about, we need to really do something different in security to take it to the next level about how we're going to secure these applications and shift left or whatever. And during the conversation with the software architects on cloud native, the Long March, one of them, Lee Atchison, just said, we really have to rethink how we describe software. This is my paraphrase. Because yes, we used to make library calls and classes and all this stuff that were software constructs, and now all that stuff happens via APIs through microservices. What we really have is not a service mesh; it's a network. We're talking all these modules over a network, and security people understand that, right? That's what they deal with all the time. So that sparked in me like, okay, so maybe we can make the right kind of analogy between this is just like, this is going over port 80. This is what they're doing. And instead of boxes, it's little pieces of code talking to each other. Maybe there's a point of entree to help the conversation take a step or two further between software and with software and security engineers. So it's a little thing said that just kind of stuck with me. It's like, that's an interesting thought.
Yep. No, I think in general, I mean, I think that there were a lot of different, interesting thoughts. So one other thing, kind of I was listening in on one of Alan's talks, and one of his panelists, Emmett Keefe, was literally in Europe about to go skiing, right? Or I think he came off the mountain. So he's in the car. You see the skis behind him. He's got his ski gear on. You're like, wow, that's a pretty good gig. How do I get that gig?
Right.
Not that I can't
do my next panel that way.
Not that I get that gig. But, Alan was talking about just, kind of how due to macroeconomic things, and we're going to start to see some pushback on, kind of some digital transformation efforts. And Emmett was like, I haven't seen that. Right. It's like I haven't seen, kind of pushback, and the economy seemed to be pretty bad. But, we haven't seen, at least, and he works for Insight Partners, right? Just a huge private equity investor in a lot of different technology sectors. They're investing in companies that, continue to grow. They're really a mezzanine and almost, kind of kind of late stage investor on that front. But I thought that was also an interesting, tidbit that, we all kind of just assume, like we assume that all applications are composed now. We just assume, because a lot of people have said it, that, kind of companies are really going to pull back on their digital transformation. I think we continue to expect that. That is what kind of our research yields. But it was interesting to get a little bit of a counterpoint from, somebody who's seeing it from a little bit of a different perspective as well.
Right. It's not, and it isn't just startups that they're investing in. These are companies, sometimes acquired, sometimes more mature startups. I heard that too, and I was jealous of his location. What it reminded me of is when things are tough, you're going through the crucible of, okay, what are we really going to do, and what are we really going to get? it doesn't. You may shed cost. It may involve people and other things, but you don't roll up the tent and fold up the carpet, right on everything. Because nobody survives by doing nothing.
Nope.
At least I don't know of anybody. You've got to, not just keep trains rolling, but you've got to keep.
No, that's right.
Because if you shut all down, all your research down, all your investment, it isn't when you start it back up, then things will be better. It is 2.5, 3 years after you've started up, you're back to where you were. So that flywheel takes a long time to get spinning back up to that same place. So you can't stop completely. You just have to get better at what you're doing.
That's right. That's right. And I think you need to be more selective about what you invest in. Mm-hmm. Right. You can't stop investment, but you can't invest in everything either. So that involves, some tough choices that companies have to make. That involves some work that these teams have to make to really, again, position the accretive value to the business for a number of these new initiatives, right? And because again, you're just not going to get everything funded, so you've got to figure out what the right mix is going to be. So it was interesting. Again, I thought just a very kind of great day. I thought the great sessions. I don't know if anybody in the audience spent some time with the fortune teller, but she was pretty entertaining for me. So that was great. Hopefully we'll have her next.
You must have good news. You're in a good mood. So
yeah, and I think that we learned a lot. Right. We learned a lot. So as we continue to move forward, and we've got a cyber oriented conference that we're going to do, kind of in the fall timeframe. And we're learning in terms of how to, kind of have research drive a lot of our, kind of shows. So we're going to keep improving through the year. And I can tell you, Predict 24 will be better, right? Because we'll be able to improve on a number of the things that we've already done.
Well, and we said this in our wrap up with Alan at the end of the day, but it's not just surveys and polls. Yes, we do all those things to gather some data, but our interactions both directly with people, also understanding what they're reading and what's happening, what they're watching on our show and others. That massive audience that we have, which is it's a privilege to have it, is driving what we're doing. It isn't, Mike's the smartest guy. He might be the smartest guy. I'm not the smartest guy, that's for sure. But it's driven by all of those factors, not just us cooking something up in the back room and let's go come up with a new wacky quadrant or a weird wave that has some unknown kooky formula and nobody knows about it, and poof, suddenly we're really smart people. It isn't. It's not driven by that. Hopefully, we've got some smarts, but it is
and some experience and some road rash for sure.
Yeah, some smarts left, I guess. It's not been knocked out of our heads. But point being is, I consider the success of yesterday driven by all those things behind it, including the team at Techstrong to make it happen, but our audience, the 500,000 people engaging with us. What a flywheel that is. And I think that's a big part of that success.
Yep. And we kind of took the wraps a little bit off of our new success map offering. So keep an eye out for that. That'll, again, we're planning to have that hit in Q2. It'll be a lot of work to get that up and running, but we're really excited about that. And again, it's the day after Predict. We're both a little bit cooked, so we're going to, kind of cut it off here, but hopefully you enjoyed it. If you haven't seen the show, go register, check out the recorded versions of it. Again, I think it's really worth your time. There was a lot of really great discussion there. And any parting thoughts, Mitch, before we wrap up?
You'll find it at techstrongevents.com is where you'll find Predict. It'll be now, or the next day, it'll be moved over to the kind of prior events, recent events. But we also, you and I are going to be in Singapore for DevOps Asia.
That's right. So February 10th is the day in Singapore live. So Alan, Mitch, myself, a number of other Techstrong folks will be there as well. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun. We're doing our software security pitch. We'll dig in and talk about software security. And there's just a whole bunch of other great sessions about really DevOps and looking at it, again, with a little bit of an Asian tint on it.
Mm-hmm. From that part of the world, for sure. And then also, if you check on Techstrong events, we have Techstrong Con, which is another kind of very outcome-focused conference. That's on March 16th. So be sure, and then we'll be at RSA. So we got a number of events that we're going to be being part of, and both Techstrong and others that we're happy to join. And of course, we have our show. So watch this. Tell your friends about Mike and Mitch, and these two characters that get on there and talk about what they're working on and what they're seeing. And we appreciate you sharing the love and helping us build that audience. So I'm promoting ourselves.
As we should. We forget to do that sometimes, or I forget to do that sometimes. So
okay.
Good. All right, Mitch. Enjoy. We will chat next week. You're going to see this a little bit further down the line, so it'll be next week for you guys. We'll record it again, and I'm sure we'll have something a little bit more timely to deal with. But again, thanks everybody, and we will see you next time.
You too. Take care.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're talking with Steve Carter, who's the CEO for Nucleus Security. We're talking about ChatGPT and how it might be used for nefarious purposes. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Michael. Appreciate it.
So in AI circles, this whole model language platform that people have created for doing all kinds of interesting things is all the rage. But some of the folks in the cybersecurity world are pretty concerned about how this might be used for something else entirely. So what exactly should we be worried about?
Well, for starters, I think it's probably good just to set the stage and mention a couple of facts that folks might not be aware of, right? The first is today, vulnerability exploitation is the number one threat facing cybersecurity threat facing organizations today. And this is kind of a new thing, actually. I think going back just a couple of years, it would have been credential reuse, things like phishing were the top cybersecurity threats. And really 2021 was the first year that we saw vulnerability exploitation become the number one technique attackers are using to compromise networks. And the number one initial access vector in ransomware attacks as well. So this is really why I think this is such an important topic. But should we be worried about it, right? That's a big question. There are a lot of different angles to that. But I would say, for starters, it's absolutely something, a technology that can and will be weaponized at some point. And there are multiple ways that tools like ChatGPT and similar technologies can be used by attackers for vulnerability exploitation.
So how exactly would that happen? Because it's pretty easy to see how it might be used for phishing attacks, but it's not clear to me how it might be used for vulnerabilities as well. I mean, is the thing smart enough to identify them, or is it just going to give me helpful hints if I'm a hacker?
Yeah, so it really does two things, two important things. One is that it can identify vulnerabilities in code really well. So today you can feed ChatGPT source code, and it can identify vulnerabilities in the source code in the same way that vulnerability scanning tools, commercial vulnerability scanning tools can do. And when you think about, okay, well, why is that a big deal, right? We've had vulnerability scanning tools around for years. Well, I mean, historically, it was really cost prohibitive for attackers to scan open source code repositories or just code at scale. And that's because the tools that you need to do that are really expensive. And so the potential here really is for ChatGPT and I think similar tech to be used by attackers as a potentially free or very affordable static code analysis tool that can identify vulnerabilities in code. So for example, it might be possible to monitor all open source code repositories and scan them for vulnerabilities in almost near real time as they're being updated and commits are being made. So that's kind of one angle. And then of course there's the exploitation side of things and how ChatGPT could be used to help you develop exploits for the vulnerabilities that it helps you find.
And I think we're underestimating how many vulnerabilities there really are in all these legacy applications that we have out there. The volume of cybersecurity technical debt is immense. So is all this going to come home to roost now?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? When you look at the National Vulnerability Database, which is really like kind of the source of truth for all publicly known vulnerabilities in software, that number is rising by about 30 to 40% each year. So 2022, we saw, I think it was just over 24,000 new vulnerabilities disclosed to the public in all software. So that includes, of course, all your normal Microsoft, Adobe type products, but also all of your open source projects. Just 6 or 7 years ago, I think that number was around maybe 7,000 or 8,000 new vulnerabilities. So it's continuously rising, to your point, and just becoming a bigger and bigger problem. So yes, I would say it's already come home to roost in the sense that attackers have taken notice and are now putting most of their focus and energy into vulnerability exploitation.
We have not patched a lot of those vulnerabilities, so that happens for a wide variety of reasons. But do you think that we will see developers being asked to patch many more vulnerabilities much faster in the coming year because we are about to have this kind of holy crap Batman moment?
Yeah, I would say in most enterprises, right? I think developers have already caught on, right? I think the average developer today is pretty aware of the threats and the risk out there. But I would say that they're struggling to keep up to the point that you mentioned earlier, just the sheer volume of new vulnerabilities that exist. And on top of it, most organizations today, actually, I think on average, organizations develop and maintain over 400 custom applications themselves. So not only do you have the vulnerabilities in products and open source tools, but you have vulnerabilities that your own developers that work for you are accidentally building into the software that they're creating for your business. And so you just have such a volume of vulnerabilities here to not just identify and fix, but there's a process in between, a vulnerability management process that involves really assessing, analyzing, triaging all these vulnerabilities after you found them to figure out which ones are most important, right? Because a lot of, for example, at Nucleus, a lot of the customers and organizations we work with have over 1 million vulnerabilities. So one of the hardest problems is just figuring out, well, what do I fix first? If I've got 1 million, how do I stack rank these things and figure out which ones actually represent the highest risk, which is a really hard thing to do. So one of the things that we look at, just kind of tying this back into AI and exploitation, one of the top things we look at is this a vulnerability that's being exploited in the wild today? Out of the 1 million that you have, it's probably a very, very small percent that are actually being exploited in the wild today. What is that going to look like a year or 2 years from now as AI and ChatGPT type technologies evolve and can identify and exploit vulnerabilities really at scale much, much faster?
Will the good guys be able to use ChatGPT to find the vulnerabilities within their own environment, hopefully first?
Yes, and I would say that that's a great point. And as scary as all of this sounds or might sound, I don't think it's all doom and gloom in the sense that I think we will have kind of a level footing here, and that the good guys will have access to the same technologies. The question is, especially in the context of large organizations that often move slow in adopting new technology, Will they use it quickly enough, right? If the bad guys start, using this today, how long will it take for the good guys to say, hey, we could use the same technology to identify vulnerabilities in our software, and at least have the same type of capabilities as our attackers. And large enterprises tend to move really slow, but I think the ones that can move quickly and adopt the technology quickly will be the ones that are the safest, I should say.
Are we involved in some sort of AI arms race now when it comes to cybersecurity? The bad guys are using it, the good guys have access to it. Is that kind of where we are, and we should just get used to the idea?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting when I think of arms race, I really think of who's developing the technology. So I would say, it's the good guys developing the technology, no question. Companies like OpenAI, and there are a lot of alternatives out there that are open source and things like that. These are all great technology companies. The question is, how is their technology going to be used and applied? And in that sense, I think there is a form of an arms race in that, if I'm, let's say, a commercial vendor and I'm selling products to identify vulnerabilities, I might very well use ChatGPT and that technology to help me do a better job of identifying vulnerabilities. And then at the same time, if I'm an attacker, to the example earlier, I might use this technology to now identify vulnerabilities at scale, across the internet in a way that gives me an advantage over larger, slower organizations. And so it's more about the arms race of how is the technology being used, not so much how it's being developed or who's developing it.
As we go forward, what's your assessment of the current state of AI and cybersecurity? For a while there, people were talking about we'll be replacing people and then we won't need all these unfilled job positions. But I don't know if that's a reality or not, or what's your sense of where are we?
I think we're a long way off from that, at least in the cybersecurity space. Especially on the technical side. When we look at technology like this, especially ChatGPT, and how it can be used, let's say in a marketing capacity, creating content, things like that, there's certainly some concern there that it's going to replace people, or you're not going to need quite the staff that you would previously. But when it comes to the actual technical roles in cybersecurity, I don't see artificial intelligence replacing people too much. I think more than that, we will see automation replacing folks, because there are still a lot of very manual processes that cybersecurity professionals have to perform. In the world I live in, we're very much focused on vulnerability management, and that is an area of cybersecurity that's notorious for a lot of manual processes. But that can be solved just by automation, right? It doesn't really need artificial intelligence. It's just automation. And so on the AI side, it's there are features of most cybersecurity products that are leveraging AI, but they're just smaller features. So I would say it's useful in cybersecurity, but I think we're quite a ways off from it actually replacing folks in a significant way.
Flipping it the other side, would you want to work in an organization that didn't have access to AI for the cybersecurity team? Because it's a pretty stressful gig as it is today, and maybe I need something that kind of levels the playing field a little bit.
Sure. I think I wouldn't want to work in an organization that's not leveraging all the available technology to do the best job they can at defending the organization, which is really the mission of the cybersecurity team. And to that extent, there really aren't a lot of tools out there that are what I'll call production ready to use, and especially in large enterprise context that are just completely reliant on AI. The biggest area that we've seen AI really shine in cybersecurity is really on endpoint technology. So just kind of think of it like antivirus technology, where The old technology would just have a list of virus signatures, and that had to be updated and pushed out. And the new technology is heavily leveraging AI to identify the malicious software that is trying to be executed on computers and block it in real time. And that's super powerful and is a great use of AI. But that's a great example of my point earlier, in that didn't replace anyone, right? The old antivirus software was just kind of doing its thing, and it was moderately effective. This next generation of endpoint antivirus is much, much more effective leveraging AI, but didn't replace any people.
All right. So we're at the start of a new year, so everybody has to get their crystal ball out. What are you expecting to see happen?
Well, like everyone else is saying, there is so much focus and energy being put into AI right now that I think we'll see a lot of really creative tools pop up that are using the APIs for things like ChatGPT to do lots of new and interesting things. I think also we'll see the technology like ChatGPT evolve much more quickly because there is such a high interest in it. I think we will see cases of AI being used and weaponized by attackers, but I don't think it's going to be game changing this year in that sense. But I think more so we're just going to see a lot of really interesting software and tools pop up that are leveraging AI in ways that we wouldn't have even imagined just last year.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Lots of things happening in the land of AI. Keep paying attention here. And frankly, though, I can't be 100% sure that that's actually Steve Carter these days, but I think it is.
Pinky promise.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Rahul Subramanian, who is the Chief Evangelist for CloudFix, and they were at the recent AWS reInvent conference, and they actually surveyed a few of the attendees to get their vibe on what they're thinking about and their pressing concerns, which of course brings us to 2023. Rahul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mike. This is a pleasure.
So walk us through the survey results a little bit. What did you guys find? And most importantly, what, if anything, surprised you?
Okay, so I think coming into reInvent, it was very clear that almost everyone had one thought on their mind, which is cloud costs are rising and how do we better manage it? And what everyone was looking for was some guidance from AWS on how to do this really well. And I think what really caught me by surprise was the fact that they didn't really address it head on. They kind of, just talked around the topic a little bit, but didn't really address it at all. And I think that was a missed opportunity for them.
So in your survey results, what exactly were people looking for, or what kind of leaps out at you as the top priority for the coming year?
Great. So when you look at all the customer base of AWS, over the last 15 years, AWS has had over 200 different service launches, and it's now at about 100,000 plus API, or way more than that. So the challenge that most customers have is how to use these APIs and these services the right way. And AWS, culturally, as much as I love them, have been extremely non-opinionated about how customers use their services. And they want customers to do whatever suits them the best. And given that scenario, what customers were really struggling with is navigating this massive space of services and API and trying to figure out what the right way to do. I mean, this is the classic challenge of too much choice and too many options. Like there are 25 different ways of launching containers in AWS. And while all of them have a place and there's a reason for it, customers who are starting off with AWS and have truly bet on AWS are now asking the question, how do we do it right? Because when they get started, there's this initial promise of, hey, the cloud is actually way more efficient. But when they get started, they find that their costs are going out of control. And so their biggest concern is, how do you do it right so that you're leveraging cloud for what it is really good at? And that is the thing that I think AWS kind of missed addressing for that particular customer base. They did get to 2 or 3 other areas, which is to say that given the current economic scenario, you should really look to evolve and innovate. Otherwise, you will perish and die. And this, I think, was very beautifully put by Werner Vogels in his keynote. But I think that was one of the few very succinct and clear messages to the customer base to say, do this, just evolve. Don't go into a cost-cutting mode given the current economic scenario. Try to innovate and evolve through this. That's your best bet. And then Swami came in with his keynote and said, data is basically going to be the biggest driver, because as the entire customer base has seen, moving all your existing workloads to the cloud is hard. It takes time, it is painful, and in a lot of cases, it may not even make sense. So the bottom line is that the biggest driver of innovation is going to be all the data that you already have. Get it into the cloud, do some amazing stuff with it. And there are amazing tools that are now available in AWS to actually leverage that data to do something interesting. And then the last one is that AWS actually went ahead and spent most of the last year actually working on a lot of governance and making sure that you have all the tools for governance to making sure that your data is secure, you don't have any of those concerns. But the bottom line for all the customers really came down to amazing tools, amazing services. We love AWS. That's where we are making the big bets. How do we be more efficient?
It seems like, to me at least, there's a lot of blame to go around here, because it's not just AWS that's the problem. A lot of organizations allow their developers just to consume resources, and there's not a lot of review or governance over what those guys are doing exactly and what costs what. So are the customers themselves part of the problem?
I do believe that traditional organizations aren't really geared to handling the new cloud environment and the mechanisms. I mean, historically, you had finance that basically used CapEx as a mechanism of managing control over what gets spent. And that was their mechanism of making sure that engineering could only spend X amount. Then you had procurement that did all the due diligence and made sure that when you were buying hardware or you're buying stuff for your on-premise environments, that you had the best deal possible. And then engineers were basically doing whatever they wanted to do, but they were always capped by the resources that were made available to them using the CapEx model. Now, come cloud, you suddenly have this ability to launch instances, to do amazing stuff and really accelerate the innovation, which is, again, the core promise of the cloud. But finance, basically, when moving to OpEx, has kind of lost control over costs. It's always retrospective. You see a bill at the end of the month and you scream, and you go to your engineering team and say, what the hell happened? And that's kind of the current mode, and they don't know how to deal with it. Procurement finds that its role is not really, defined, because here everything is dynamic, everything is on demand, and their role where they were doing stuff upfront doesn't really exist. I mean, imagine if you were starting to launch a cloud resource and you had to go through, 7 layers of approval. That just doesn't make sense at all in the cloud environment. And engineering has no capability to, or they've never been trained to have financial discipline, because that's not their core competence either. So I think FinOps plays a really important role in trying to bring in some of these organizational structures to help organizations navigate this stuff better. But that said, guidance from the cloud service providers is really also key at the same time to making sure that the organizations that are consuming their service have a roadmap, have a guide on how they can leverage these things and do things efficiently.
Mm-hmm. One of the issues that also comes up is the relative guidance you get from AWS about how to consume these services. And it seems like they're pushing people towards Graviton, and they're saying that if you are concerned about costs, you should essentially refactor workloads to run on this new class of processors that they've built on top of an ARM architecture. Is that feasible for organizations? I mean, what impact do you think that will have?
I think there are 3 tiers of getting cost efficient and cost savings. It's not just the Graviton stuff. So tier 1 is really the super simple stuff that AWS has been recommending forever. Like if you look at their blogs, they put out about 3,000 different recommendations every year. And that's a whole lot to go through. But there are tons of very insightful, simple recommendations that you literally just can turn on and get a bunch of savings. And this is probably 10 to 20% of savings on your bill. They've been recommending it in a very subtle way, not really being explicit about it, but those recommendations are there. And so we built a solution called CloudFix, which basically just tackles that. They're super simple AWS recommended fixes that, you just turn on like a Roomba and let it go and, get you the savings. So that's tier 1. And it's super simple. It actually fixes your problems, not just, finds them. The second tier is where you actually start using AWS's managed services, and you start, instead of managing these services yourself and having custom, builds for these, use a managed service. The economies of scale and the efficiency that you get from not having to manage stuff is phenomenal. And you get to save another 10 to 20% by using those kind of services. The third set is literally architecture changes. Some of these changes require major application surgery. Some of them require you to change the way you architect your product. These recommendations include things like moving into a completely event-driven architecture or moving to Graviton as an example. These are all very higher order changes that you could technically make to your product. But the benefits of there is you can actually end up saving up to 70, 80% on your existing costs if you do everything right. So there are different levels and maturity levels that organizations are usually at. And I believe that they have to take a very stepwise approach to achieving these cloud cost savings.
What is the challenge in getting people to have that higher level of maturity? Because we hear about cloud ops and DevOps forever and a day, and it doesn't seem like a lot of organizations are applying that with a high level of discipline to their cloud computing environments. So fundamentally, what's the issue?
I think the issue is the distributed nature of responsibility. This is a combination of engineering and finance, where the execution is the responsibility of engineering, but the controls, the requirements, and the constraints are provided by finance. And finance doesn't know the trade-offs that engineering has to make, and engineering doesn't know or doesn't usually relate to the constraints that finance puts on them. And they invariably tend to be in loggerheads with each other across organizations. And I think that's where the FinOps organization and FinOps as a practice is evolving to help organizations solve that fundamental problem in their organizational structures. You need a team that really understands the execution as well as the financial aspects of it to be able to do this really well. And unfortunately, traditional organizational structures don't allow for that. There are very clear boundaries about what finance does and what engineering does, but this one is starting to merge the two for this to be effective.
Do you think at some point we'll be using artificial intelligence to figure out how to optimize these environments? It seems like perhaps we need a machine to save ourselves from the machines.
That's a good point. I think there are certain tools that use machine learning. I wouldn't say artificial intelligence. I'd specifically talk about some machine learning algorithms, which absolutely are very useful. So anomaly detection, for example, is a great way to make sure that, when you have a certain cost trend and you suddenly see a big spike, you can identify those using machine learning techniques and take action. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, what you've deployed and the intent of what you've deployed and how you deployed it and where you've deployed it, is hard for a machine to discover today. There are a lot of best practices. There are a lot of, a lot of simple things that you can do to be efficient. But I think those are more rule-based at this point, right? Like there is a new service that AWS creates, which is cheaper, next generation, faster, and more performant. And, the price is great. The rule of thumb should be get on the latest generation of the instance or get on the latest generation of the EBS volume so that you save money. That's not something that you need AI for. I don't think that we are at that maturity level where AI drives a lot of that cost savings and stuff like that. I think we need to start with some of the basics. We are not yet there at that level of maturity where the basics are all done. And then we need these higher order, machine learning and artificial intelligence driven cost savings. I think we are a way off from that level. We are still scratching the surface on getting started with cost savings at this point.
Speaking of basics, what's your assessment of cloud security these days? I mean, in theory, the cloud platform is probably more secure than the on-premise platform, but it sure seems like the processes that we're using leave a lot to be desired.
Absolutely. I think without a doubt, if used right, what you can do in the cloud far exceeds anything that you could dream of in your on-premise environment. Like it just doesn't make sense to make anywhere close to the kind of investments that the cloud providers are making on security. But at the end of the day, it's really important also to realize that this is a shared security model. There is a stack below your application that the cloud service providers give you, which is incredibly secure if you use it the right way. Unfortunately, a lot of organizations still haven't caught up on learning about what it means to use the cloud in the right way. I still see a bunch of security and compliance requests that come to me that still say, hey, we want to make sure that you have a fire extinguisher next to your door in your data center, and please check the box. And a lot of the security these days ends up becoming this checkbox exercise without truly understanding what's happening under the hood. And I think that needs to change. And I think the cloud providers like AWS make it really easy to leverage a lot of the very heavy lifting that needs to be done. They've already done all that hard work for you. So if you use something like the well-architected framework to kind of define all the other security parameters around your application, I think invariably you end up in a place that's 10x better than anything you could have imagined on-premise. But at the same time, if you don't do it right, you can also screw up a lot of things. So it comes with, there's a lot of power in there, but there's also a lot of responsibility that comes with it.
All right. Speaking of the opportunity to screw things up, we hear a lot about cloud native and Kubernetes in the cloud these days, but there's a lot of complexity involved. So how do I kind of balance the benefits of Kubernetes, which allows me to scale up and down more easily, and the complexity of a platform that has more bells and whistles on it than anything I can remember?
So I'm probably going to take a very contrarian view to the views of the industry here. I actually do not think that Kubernetes is cloud native. I think it's a misnomer. Kubernetes is the least common denominator product that allows you to span your workloads across the cloud. And I don't even understand why people want to do that, because they have this false notion of some kind of vendor lock-in that doesn't make any sense. And Kubernetes, while started off being a way of utilizing your, spare or underutilized servers on premise and just making the most of it, it turned from there into the go-to tool for everything. And I think that was the big mistake. Kubernetes doesn't really get you any of the real benefits. It, in fact, complicates life for you no end. That said, cloud native for me is using cloud service providers' managed services that do all the heavy lifting for you with and just give you a simple API and a simple interface to deal with it. When I talk about this, it's like AWS Forecast, AWS Pinpoint. These are all kinds of services which are higher order services that they manage, they run, and they have a very crisp and clear interface about what the product does and how you should access it, right? Kubernetes giving control to your developers to do, a million things with it without the deep expertise on how to manage it just doesn't make any sense at all. So, no offense to the Cloud Native Foundation and the Kubernetes team. I think they built a great product, but the use case for that product was, I've got a ton of servers that are lying around being wasted. Let me figure out a better way to use it. Yes, it is awesome for that case, not multi-cloud, not I want to build the next cloud native application and let me build it on Kubernetes. Those are the wrong decisions to make there.
Right. Ultimately, is complexity kind of our biggest enemy here? Because if I look inside of any organization, they're consuming a ton of cloud resources, but it's across a very narrow band of services because the other ones are just too complex to get at.
Yes, I would say complexity is the enemy, but the bottom line for most organizations just becomes how efficiently are they operating and running to solve the core business problem that they've set out to solve, right? Complexity is one of the factors. Like at the end of the day, it all boils down to cost. That's the way every organization sees things. What is the cost for me to solve the problem that I have at hand? The cloud solves the problem efficiently for certain classes of problems. And organizations need to learn how to leverage that. If you have tons of data, if you've got certain, if there are insights you want to get out of the data that you have, or there are very standard workloads that you already run today, get them to the cloud, get them to be managed, simplify them. That's what brings the cost down, right? And use them the right way. So there's a ton of hygiene and stuff that needs to be done. And yes, with the cloud providers now with 100,000, 200,000 APIs that are available to you, there is complexity in that alone. Just knowing how to do things right is hard to keep up with. And that's kind of why I keep saying efficiency and cloud cost savings are nonstop. You have to keep up with it all the time. There are new services coming all the time. There are new best practices that are being launched, all the time. And customers' requirements about what they want to do in the cloud is also changing all the time. So at the end of the day, it all boils down to what are the super simple things that you can do to be most efficient in executing and delivering the value that you're looking to deliver with the cloud.
All right. Well, it sounds like those KISS principles still apply in the era of the cloud. Rahul, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. And alongside our extensive conference coverage and our episode of Techstrong Research Review, we had plenty of great content today. We'll be back again tomorrow, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.